Good morning and welcome. This is Sunrise Daily. I'm Ayo Makile.
Rise and shine. It's a beautiful Thursday morning here in Lagos, Nigeria. I'm Kayode Okikiolu.
In case you haven't risen, just get up. So you're saying.
So it doesn't just mean wake up. It means, it's a mental thing. Okay, you need to shape up to the day, because it's a great day, by the way.
Oh, it is a great day, and I'm just wondering how great the members of ASU feel about that, how great the students of Nigeria today perceive the day.
Well, the federal government should also be in that formula, I imagine, because it's not just the students and ASU, it's the federal government, ASU, and the student. And I think it's a very important question. How great do they feel right now? Because the sector is nothing to write home about. I mean, this is not where we should be. Let me just say that. I mean, coming from where we started off from, I mean, we're like the star boys, as they say, for education on the continent and even far and wide. But today, that is not the case. So it's the second week of the ASU warning strike, as I put it, 1 month. And my question is, are we approaching this with all the sense of urgency that we should approach it with? And I always refer back to COVID-19. I mean, people always thought maybe the government's mill grinds very slowly, naturally, and they thought, okay, maybe this is something we'll get used to. But COVID-19 came, and you see how fast government moved, because it was a pandemic, right? And they thought, we don't want to lose lives. Our lives are at stake, by the way, and I think that was an important thing that helped COVID to sail through, because it was a threat to even the elites themselves. So we moved very fast. But the education sector, tertiary education sector, public tertiary education sector is on strike as of today. And it's almost 2 weeks now. We're in the second week, is ending right now. And it looks like things are moving so slow. But we want our viewers to listen to something from the Minister of Labor and Productivity and hear what he has to say, especially about the IP's UTAS controversy and what the plan is. So listen up, please, and we'll be back.
We have agreed on UTAS now. We're going to do a joint test, both technical teams, and they find the areas of reconciliation, because UTAS on its own is a homegrown system. And executive order, presidential order 3 and 5 encourages homegrown system, local content. So we should be able to encourage them. And that's what I told them. But they have this phobia, I can say suspicion, that government doesn't want anything other than IPs. And I kept on telling them, no matter what system you have, no matter what solution you have, you must have a handshake with IPs, so that the government will know about their funds and their movement of the funds. So that is it. So many things, countries go to war because of lack of information or misinformation. So I'm asking them to brief their people appropriately and then call off the strike before the expiration of the time they're talking about. So by Monday, we will have got back to them on some of the issues and invite them back for the discussion.
Don't forget that NAN said that they would carry out a protest, mass demonstration on Monday, because they give the government a 7-day ultimatum. And my question is, when I talked about COVID, it was a pandemic. This is actually a pandemic on its own, because we have thousands, millions of students who are home right now. In fact, some of them have not gone home because they're hoping that this will be resolved as quick as possible. And this is not the first time, really, in just how many years? The last one was about 8-9 months, the longest in history. So imagine 8-9 months doing nothing in that regard. If there's anything to be called a pandemic, it is this. And I don't see government moving as fast on this one.
You know, we don't seem to recognize how long this problem is going to last, or rather, how long it has lasted so far, and what are the implications of delaying this further. The COVID-19 that you talked about was a global pandemic, and we literally declared a state of emergency in the health sector. There are those who have called for a state of emergency to be declared in the education sector, but we don't seem to understand the implications, the far-reaching, long-term implications of it. Recall just a few days ago, former President Obasanjo was talking about the 15 million out-of-school children. And he was saying that we're already breeding a completely new set of insurgents, and we don't seem to understand what that means. The implications of not treating our education sector the way it ought to be treated, we may not even begin to feel it now. What is happening to us today as a nation, not having the problems solved the way we expect them to be solved, not having the eggheads to produce for Nigeria the way we expect. There are things that happened maybe 20, 30, 40 years ago. And not giving attention to the ivory towers, the education sector, is part of the reason why this is happening to us, and it is still happening, and we seem to be turning a blind eye. And I don't think we fully understand, which is why I still keep asking the question, do we have a national vision? Because if we have a national vision, we know that this is the direction that we want to be going. We will know to pay attention to academic education. We will know to pay attention to social education. We will know to pay attention to moral education. Because when we talk about education, we're not just talking about academics. We're talking about academic education, social education, moral education, political education, business education, you name it. The whole works. But we don't seem to even understand how serious an issue we have on our hands. In another 10, 20 years from now, then maybe we'll begin to catch a vision. But do we want to wait till that time? Do we really want to wait?
And the question is, do we see this the same way? Because it appears as though some are crying more than the bereaved, as it were. And I think what's quite instructive is still using that COVID-19 analogy, because I think it helps to bring things home the more. I mean, COVID hit, and then we were sort of looking up to developed countries for vaccine, right? But don't forget, they were able to develop the vaccines because of the investment in the education sector, in research, which is a part of education, a vital part of education. And that helped them to move very fast to get the vaccines. But here we are right now.
We had a system of producing vaccines in this country, Kate. We had a system of producing, those who always refer to the vaccine manufacturers, yellow fever vaccines that were produced in this country years ago, 70s, 80s, and the rest of them. What happened to the systems that we had then that were able to do those things without looking to the West or to any other country at that for that?
I think it's clear.
Yes, the World Bank, the World Health Organization, everyone is now talking about the AFDB supporting, vaccine independence for the African continent. 5, 6 countries in Africa, including Nigeria, are going to be, championing that. Good to hear, good to know, fine. But is it sustainable? Is it going to be sustained? Are the systems of government? Because don't forget, I always talk about the engine of government, which is the civil service. Do we have the system strong enough to sustain that thing that you talked about, the analogy of the health sector that you talked about? Without education, will we be able to do it? I mean, there are some things that are original to us. For how long has Professor Adeyeye, Mojisola Adeyeye of NAFDAC been talking about us producing our own health solutions in this country? They call it phytomedicine.
Who will produce it? The students that are not in
school right now. Students that are not in school right now.
And
we're only talking about health now. I mean, look around.
I mean, it cuts across.
Look, the minister is talking about a homegrown UTAS not being good enough. That's the way it sounds to me, that it needs to have a handshake with eyepiece. Granted. But then is it does it have to take like 1 million years? How long did it take us to deal with COVID-19 vaccines?
Interestingly, this thing has been with NITA, as it were. NITA has been looking at this UTAS, trying to conduct, is it integrity test or whatever? There was talk about the software and the hardware, that also has software, there's no hardware, and I'm thinking, but the hardware is a computer,
There are those who will say, Kayode, that as far as this issue is simply because some people are not interested. And the question a number of people will be asking right now is there a deliberate effort at whatever level to frustrate education,
it looks
to
like
frustrate young people?
It looks like that.
Because really. Because it will look like this is a direct attack, so to speak, on young people in the country.
Or if we're saying that we don't need education, I think we should come out and say it clearly and tell the citizens of Nigeria, we don't think education is the way to go, okay? This is what we need to do, because, I mean, we're saying it without saying it. If students have been on strike, ASU has been on strike for what? Close to 2 weeks now, and I'm talking nothing is happening, as it were. People that are meant to learn coming off an 8-month, 9-month strike. And this is happening again. Let's just come out and say, we need to look into other ways. Education is not working for it. But I imagine that is not the idea this morning. And I'd like government to move faster, those involved to move faster, because the future of our nation is at stake.
And I don't even think we know how serious that's what you just said is. We don't seem to have an understanding yet of how serious the problem or the emergency of education is on our hands now. Let's not wait any longer, because today we're talking about academic education. We're talking about university students. How about all the issues that we're having in primary schools and secondary schools? And these same people are going to graduate into universities? Okay, let's look at the papers this morning. Let's begin this conversation, well, the papers. I look at the papers this morning with the Guardian newspaper. And it looks like a panacea of sorts. How to restructure Nigeria by AFDB President Additional. You know, I don't even know where to begin with that. Can we restructure Nigeria without education? Just saying. Just saying.
You know, right? Because you're restructuring a structure to hand it over to certain people in the future. You've not educated those people. What kind of structure will you hand over to them? How will they handle that structure? How are the current ones even planning to restructure, coming off the kind of education we got? I'm just going to stop there.
Two writers clarifies why older generation must give way to young. Okay. Which young?
The ones that are on strike right now, absolutely.
Agbakoba Abdullahi, others unveil next president. Who that is, you'll find on the front page of the paper, continues on page 2. Right under the nameplate, 2 stories there. One of them, government fixes February 28 to resolve issues with ASU. So let the strike continue. We'll talk after, February 28. That's what, isn't it?
4 days from now. That's Monday.
Okay, the story is on page 5. On page 2, you find FEC OK's 58 billion naira contracts for works, humanitarian affairs. All of that continues on the inside page. It's Constitution Review, that's on the bottom page of the page. Constitution Review splits Attorney General and Justice Minister's office. Find the story on page 4.
I'm sorry, Attorney General and Justice Ministers?
The 2 offices will not be split. We have...
Okay. Like, it's meant to split it, not the issues raised have split the... Because I'm like, they're the same, right? So how can one be against each other? It was just the wording, but I get it now.
That's the Guardian today.
Well, let's take a look at Nigerian Tribune, which also focuses on, restructuring the Constitution Amendment. Review of 1999 Constitution. Reps Committee makes 68 recommendations. Aisha Buhari at NAS to witness laying of report. It was, it was an unusual sight for the lawmakers yesterday, seeing the wife of the president. I said, I've come to support my own, especially the, affirmative action and those creation of special seats for women in the National Assembly. So,
I guess we'll have to wait
and see how that comes up, because the speaker actually said, well, yes, but there's a lot of lobbying to do, right? So I mean, the presence will go a long way, but it won't take away from the process as well, because this is lawmaking and a lot of things go into it. So, I mean, we'll be talking about that further.
Is this
today.
lawmaking or constitution making? I'm just saying.
Well, so law is a constitution.
Oh, my
And it's shorter to say lawmaking, please. Say constitution making. It's a mouthful. That's a page 25 read this morning, and you see that FG has to meet to reconvene February 28th. I think enough has been said on that already. Or has it? I doubt it. Osun PDP World Congress, 2 killed, many injured as supporters clash. I mean, how close are we to getting to a point where these things will happen and no much as a slap will exchange, faces, if I could use that. We should get to the point where we don't engage in all of this just because of politics. We should have grown beyond that. But that's what we have right now. A very sad one. And court orders interim forfeiture of 10 properties of Yari to FG. That's where I leave it for the Nigerian Tribune.
And more on that you might find on the inside pages. Nigerian News Direct has this one on its front page, and it's a kind of twist to a popular story. 2023 elections, Buhari's aide drops hints on Tinubu as preferred presidential candidate, whatever that means. Find the details on page 3. Buhari, Tinubu are brothers. Nobody can come between them. That's subscribed to Jibrin Abdul Mumin as Tinubu extends consultation visit to Oni today.
I didn't hear the president endorse anybody, though.
Well, is it one of those speculations?
Or exclusive?
Well,
how do they call those things?
Don't forget, we've had presidential spokesmen say when they speak for the president.
I don't know. Did any presidential spokesperson say that as well?
Well,
no, I didn't hear that.
This one says President Buhari's aide, Ahmad, drops hint on Tinubu as preferred presidential candidate. The details you'll find on the inside pages. Is this the president speaking or the president aide speaking? Find the details on
drops
the
hint.
page.
Oh gosh.
It drops the hint, right? You just pick it back up, right? Electoral Act Amendment Bill, somewhere on the lower part of the page. Buhari ready for Ascent Friday. That's ascribed to sources, and the details on the inside pages, and several others right there on the front page of the Nigerian News Direct today.
Well, next on our buffet, it's the breakfast, right? It's a Vanguard, and it focuses on party politics, specifically the APC convention. APC governors, other stakeholders battle over party chair. It's a page 5 read. Consultations, horse trading as party leaders split over North Central, Northwest. Those against convention are not giving up. Now want to dictate who becomes chairman. That's according to a source. Adds that they're targeting somebody close to Buhari's most trusted minister. Okay, that's confusing. Somebody close to Buhari's most trusted minister. We'll just maybe wait.
An age to an age to
an age. Page 5 perhaps clears the air on that one. In case you're wondering, can you just break it down for us? There's the Constitution Amendment story as well. Reps panel makes U-turn, proposes immunity for Senate President and Speaker. This will also be part of our conversation this morning, definitely. Big one, I must tell you, Constitution review, the 1999 Constitution. And of course, Buhari to sign electoral bill tomorrow, presidency source. And I know you're waiting for my decision on Mr. and Mrs.
Oh, yes.
Well, the people have asked me to skip Mr. and Mrs. this morning. Is that a protest on the floor of Sunrise Day? Well, Mr. and Mrs. has a very interesting twist this morning. Let me not let the cat out of the bag for you and just flip to sports
this cat
page.
really wants to get out of the bag, but I'm just going to leave you.
Well, I shouldn't even put a cat in a bag. It's not fair. Kagwari faces more woes at sports news. And the big one, Super Falcons qualify for Alcon in style. 3-0 aggregate against Ivory Coast. And it was quite interesting to see Plumpton do her dance yet again. Interesting. That's the Vanguard for you.
Leadership newspaper has a twist on the same leadership recruitment process as APC PDP considers Southern ticket. Hope of Igbo presidency dims over killings in Southeast. All of that you find on page 4. It's definitely troubling, very, very troubling what you hear, what you're reading concerning this story. Regional leaders blamed for worsening situation. It's not enough to deny us presidency, scribes to Ohaneze. Attacks unacceptable, Northern Group fumes. Tasks ahead of 2023 elections challenging. That's according to INEC. Find the details on page 4 of the paper this morning. And something about the adulterated fuel story. Adulterated fuel. Our product conforms with Nigeria's specification, ascribed to Duke Oil and ONO. Find the details on page 27 of the paper this morning. There's a number of other stories you'll find interesting. That's the leadership newspapers today.
Well, Daily Trust also leads with another endorsement. It says Buhari, or do I say purported endorsement now? Buhari endorses Abdullahi Adamu as APC chairman. That's how the Daily Trust puts it this morning. Convention to ratify nomination, aspirants kick. So, yet again, another endorsement. It's like the season of endorsement. And I put that in quotes. Aisha Buhari at National Assembly seeks special seats for women. That's also on the front page. And let me just take one more for you this morning in Sport for Choice. 80% of military personnel performing police duties in 36 states. That's according to the CDS. 80% of military personnel performing police duties.
Most certainly disturbing. Most certainly disturbing. Most certainly disturbing, especially when you find out that even their primary duty of, sovereignty, protecting the sovereign entity of Nigeria is still there.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, that's the Daily Trust.
Talking about dailies, the Daily Times has this one on its front page, and it's a little more interested in the economy. FG moves to reduce inflation, improve economy. How that is going to be done, you find out on the front page, continues on page 2. As FEC approves 58 billion naira contracts for works, humanitarian affairs ministries. And above the nameplate, insecurity. Act fast before Nigeria turns into a battlefield. Senate tells Buhari again. Story continues on page 2 of the paper this morning, among several others. Politics. Yakubu charges new INEC appointees to uphold integrity and rule of law. Please do. That's the Daily Times newspapers this morning.
On a final note, I think, New Telegraph leads with insecurity. Declare terrorist leaders wanted, Senate tells FG. Calls for an operational base within Danko Wasagu Sakaba local government area. Urges Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs to urgently provide relief materials to affected areas. And you see how rivalry stalled counterinsurgency war by Shetima. And I like that we're still paying attention to this, because there's a tendency to look away and focus on politics alone. And page 2 and 6 has more details. And NNPC releases distribution details for 387.5 million liters of fuel to solve scarcity. But we're waiting to see that. I think people will believe when they see that the queues have disappeared. And finally, overwhelmed, extinction fear grips carriers as Nigerian Airlines lost $60 million to bird strikes and 20 billion naira to flight delay. 159 stranded Nigerians return from Libya. And let me just take this one at the bottom strip. It's according to a study, sound waves could help regrow bones. So page 6 has more details. Which kind of sound waves, what kind of bones? Yet again, another study comes out with this one. That's the New Telegraph this morning. And that's a look at some of the dailies we have for you this morning. But don't go anywhere. We have a full lineup for you. And we'll be back in a moment. Just stay with us.
Well, that's our first conversation this morning on the Constitution Review. Of course, for those who have been following it. Well, two gentlemen join us this morning to have a conversation around this. Right Honorable Onofiok Luke is a member of the House Ad hoc Committee on Constitution Review. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Ayo. Good to have you.
Also joining us from Abuja studio is John Mutu, who is National Coordinator, Democracy Vanguards, and also a parliamentarian, a legislative consultant. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Good morning, Makinde. Good morning, Nigerians.
Well, Honorable, let's begin with you on this. You'll forgive me if I begin with something that I consider a little disturbing, and you must have heard us talking about the education segment of our national life. ASU is on strike, universities and all of that, and they don't seem to be getting due attention as and when. I'm wondering, was this in any consideration at all in all of the process that you talked about?
Good morning, Ayo, and good morning, Nigerians. And I want to say that, though these issues like the ASU strike that just started, we had already done some considerations on constitutional alterations before then. But there is one provision that we had to look at, and I want to say that I'm just here on invitation. I'm not speaking for the ad hoc committee. I'm speaking as an individual here, and I have to make that point clear because I don't have the mandate of the ad hoc committee to speak. But as a member of that committee, you see that there are certain provisions of the Constitution that are non-justiciable, Chapter 2, and one of them is the educational objectives for policies of government. And so we've tried in our little way, part of the alteration is to make education a human right, a fundamental human right. And so there is that provision, and there is that provision in our alteration, in our document, in the report that was submitted to the House at plenary, seeking to make education a fundamental human right. And but to what extent of education? And we know that you cannot build in law. They say you cannot put something on nothing. The very critical point of education is the primary level, the elementary level, and the basic level. And I know that government at the state and at the federal have been trying to do some level of investment there. So there has to be a constitutional alteration. There has to be a constitutional framework. The rejigging of the ground norm to give the citizens the right, that inalienable right for them to seek redress where they feel that they have not been provided enough. So there is that provision in the constitutional alteration to make universal basic education a fundamental human right for Nigerians.
You referenced the Constitution. Of course, it is there. 18.3 of the current one talks about the fact that government shall strive to eradicate illiteracy, and to this end, government shall, as and when practicable, provide free primary education. You talked about that. Free secondary education, free university education, and free adult literacy program. One of the questions that will naturally come to anyone is, government shall strive. In other words, if that's at the whim of government. They may do it, they may not do it, and they would not be opposing, they would not be against the Constitution if it doesn't happen. So is there any way the National Assembly, in your personal opinion, as you have said, is there any way the National Assembly, do you think that the National Assembly, given the powers that it has, can do anything to compel, action to foster education in the country? Because if we don't do that right, we are not serving the interest of the nation in the long run.
Yeah, so that I don't misinform, I might not know the exact wordings of that provision that, the new provisions in the altered Section 18. Okay. But part of what we are doing and we are seeking to do is to see how we can try to do away with that clause as soon as practicable, and to try to get education at that basic level, the secondary level, the elementary level. I can speak for sure of that, to make it an inalienable right of the citizen. And with that, that means that even citizens can begin to seek redress. Even citizens can begin to leverage on such provision to ask and demand from government, the provision of basic education. I will not, because I've not, like I said, things are done in structured manner. I will not be able to bring the document of the National Assembly that we have not voted on to begin to bear term. If I were to have opportunity, I would be able to speak directly to that specific provision. But I know that there is that provision to make education a fundamental human right.
Okay, so in terms of yes or no, before we get into the meat now, does that provision, will it change the fortunes of education in Nigeria?
I want to believe it will, in the sense that why do we make law? We make law to fill the lacuna, to cure any mischief that we have seen. We've seen that there is a great challenge in the educational system of Nigeria because we have left education to maybe the latitude of for the policymakers, the policy formulators, to be at liberty to take a decision. And that is why you can see some cases, some policy formulators, some policy makers, and some people in charge of education system, sometimes, with due respect to some who have given their heart out to make sure that the education system works, sometimes they give a lackadaisical attitude and they give excuses. So my answer is yes, that with this is a step in the right direction. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. And so with this, we know that maybe subsequent legislature, maybe the 10th National Assembly, maybe the Houses of Assembly would begin to build upon this. And we are not there yet, but I want to believe that with God on our side and with commitment and passion on the side of us, because I don't want to exclude myself, us, those of us saddled with the responsibility of managing public lives of Nigerians. With commitment and passion and sincerity of purpose, we would answer that question in the affirmative.
Now, all of this is dependent on whether or not this amendment process or review process sails through. And I recall when all of this started with the 9th Assembly, the Committee for Senate was announced in, February 2020. The House Committee came much later, in October of the same year. But we didn't hear anything until you started crisscrossing, the states for, hearings and all that. And I think that was in May, June of last year. And then there was a lull again up until now when we heard that it's been submitted, and then there will be all of that process. Can you help us fill those gaps? Because for a lot of people, they're thinking, maybe this is being put off to last minute, and then it will be carried over to, as you said, the 10th Assembly or whichever one. Help us fill in the gaps. How did this take this long? Because for some people, it should have happened already.
Okay, the action we have taken, the law, as you have said, according to you, it's because of the fact that if you want to be kind to us, you'd agree with us that there were yearnings and aspirations of Nigerians for certain provisions of the law to be put in place. One, let's not lose sight of the fact that we needed to reform the oil and gas industry, the petroleum industry in the country. And so there was much pressure on us to be able to pass the Petroleum Industry Act. And you know that much energy was put into that. We had challenges, and we had to marry the interest of the host communities, the interest of government, and the back and forth before we could settle and enact the Petroleum Industry Act. And even up to now, some persons, especially where I come from, the Niger Delta, are still not comfortable with the percentage given to host communities. And so with that done, we were able to pass that so that we could give a direction, because there was a cloud of uncertainty around the oil and gas industry with the back and forth of the Petroleum Industry Act. And that's why we could not have the level of investment in the oil and gas industry that we ought to have had. And so that took our time. Then came the electoral reform, amendment to the Electoral Act. Nigerians wanted some amendment that would guarantee free, credible elections. And you give it to us at the National Assembly that we devoted our time and passion to make sure that that happens. And then the Appropriation Act. And other issues, we had issues of NSAS, and which we had to address, and picking from the challenges from the field, we had to do some rejigging, like the National Human Rights Commission. We have to rejig the act to be able to accommodate certain things. So the law, the reason for the law was because there were other pressing national issues that we had to attend to, and we didn't back out. And so, having finished with those issues, We felt, and we've passed the Electoral Act, awaiting Mr. President's assent. The next thing we feel we should do is to make sure that we have the constitutional alteration come on table. And I believe that it's coming at the right time. And we've come this far. We've had consultation. We have led the report. We are debating on the report on Tuesday and Wednesday. And then we have had the chambers set up in the House of Representatives under the able leadership of Right Honourable Femi Gbajabiamila and the entire leadership. They have prepared the chambers to make sure that we go for electronic voting so that every man would answer his father's name on every issue.
All right, let's take this to Abuja. Mr. Mutu, I know that you have worked with the members of the National Assembly in both chambers for quite a while. So I'm wondering, from where you sit, from your own standpoint, consulting with them and all of that, working with them, what are some of the challenges that you think, well, maybe have been worked at for quite a while, but could still have been done better? Honorable Luke here has spoken to some of the reasons for the law, which, many people have been wondering, is this ever going to happen? What are some of those challenges that Nigerians may, in your opinion, not be aware of, that lawmakers have to contend with?
Okay, thank you so much, Ayo, for that very, very important question. Like you know, governance it's a very, very tedious process. It requires a lot of consultations. It requires a lot of reflection. It requires a lot of networking, and before decisions are finally made. And as a privileged insider, I'm aware of some of the issues that Right Honourable Luke actually mentioned. For some of us, we would have preferred that, maybe we would have wished that this process had ended before now. But unfortunately, we are here today. But it is better late than never. Like you said, there are other issues that perhaps those outside may not be privy to. But like I said, we are moving into an election period. People are now maybe more focused on election issues. The zeal with which Nigerians engage the constitutional review process, attended the public hearings and all that had waned because people had expected immediate action. But due to other considerations, like you rightly noted, other priorities that has taken the time of the legislature, maybe we found ourselves where we are today. We are here, let's focus on what is on the table, rather than looking backwards. Let's just hope that the process is taken forward quickly and concluded within the shortest possible time. From the schedule I've seen from the National Assembly, the plan is to make sure that the voting is concluded by next week, and this is transmitted to the state houses of assembly for the ratification. That is where the action should be moving towards. That's where everybody should be focused. How can we start engaging with the legislature at the state level to ensure that we get the 2/3, 24 houses of assembly voting positively on those issues that are on the table for amendment?
Well, one
other issue that I also know that must have also contributed to some of the delays is the COVID pandemic. That also created a lot of challenges for the legislature at some point. But let's move on. I think that's what I would say at this point.
Well, while all those are valid, Mr. Mutu, there are those who are also wondering how much politics will influence some of the decisions that has been made or may be made in this process. Remember that in the process of the Electoral Act Amendment Bill, there was that consideration, as far as many people are concerned, that some decisions in the law were politicized, whether or not correctly, or I don't know. But so how much do you think politics plays a role in this particular process of the constitutional review process? Don't also forget that there's going to be voting. Do you have fears, concerns as an individual that some of the voting may be along party lines or some other sentiments?
Thank you so much. I didn't hear the last part of your interventions. Maybe it was a network glitch. But I heard the first part of it where you talked about politics. You can never discountenance politics in the lawmaking process, because it is more or less a give and take. It's a consultative process where people canvass different opinions, people canvass different viewpoints. But the most important thing is, at the end of the day, we should be aiming towards building consensus that will be beneficial for the greater good of Nigerians. The Constitution is the most important document, it's the ground norm of this country, and it also provides for the constitutional arrangement, the governance arrangement of this country. It's also responsible for the distribution of resources. So any attempt to amend the Constitution, any section of the Constitution, will require a lot of consultation, will require a lot of politicking, a lot of lobbying. Like Right Honorable Luke said, and in your opening statement, you saw that the First Lady of the Federal Republic of Nigeria had to come to the chamber yesterday to continue with the advocacy, to continue with the lobby, to ensure that some of the issues that are canvassed are given favorable response. The legislature, that is why it is divided into various constituent districts, units. In the Senate, we have senatorial district, while in the House of Reps, we have federal district. Each member is coming with a bucket of demand. Each member's responsibility is to ensure that he is able to attract as much as possible to his constituency. So a member's primary allegiance is to his immediate constituency. And that is why the people will tell you, we sent you there, you are there to represent us. So if any member is speaking in that chamber, his first consideration is that, do we stand to lose anything by this amendment? What is this amendment bringing to my federal district or my senatorial district? No matter how plausible that reform may be, if it's going to shortchange its people, it would definitely want to resist it. Whether it is for the greater good of the entire, but if the people will lose that benefit, it definitely will stand to continue to resist that. But like we said, minority will have in politics and in democracy, minority will have their say, but the majority will have their way. But the most important thing is, let's build consensus. Whatever decision we are going to be taking should be such that it does not harm and no one is left behind. Majority should not just bamboozle the minority and let their wishes continue to dominate at all times. But for the sake of harmony and peace in the country, consensus should be built around the issues. And that is why the amendment process for the Constitution is made so stringent that before any item is amended, you must get the number. For the Constitution, according to Section 9, you must, for voting to take place and for any item to be amended, you must get at least 2/3 majority voting in the affirmative. And that is why both chambers, to remove those ambiguities, have maybe opted to use electronic voting to ensure that they get that minimum threshold. The same thing, for any of those amendments to also scale through, it must get to must be ratified by at least 24 houses of assembly before any of those amendments can go through. So you can never discountenance politics in this, but it's how we discuss, how we consult, how we all, discuss together to ensure that at least we are all on the same page. Well, the primary purpose is to ensure that Nigeria is better for it.
Right. We'll
are they going to be voting along political lines? I've not seen that, because the Constitution Committee, the ad hoc committee, is comprised of all political parties, and they are all working towards that.
Okay, let's bring this to Lagos now. You've talked about the process. We'll still get into the lobbying perspective and all of that. But let's dig into this one, because it's a big deal, a really big deal. And at the heart of it is the conversation around restructuring. In fact, a lot of people are really interested in this because of the possibilities that this might have on the structure of Nigeria as a nation. I'd like you to tell us, because restructuring has different definitions for different people. There's the talk about what states creation, powers of the state, resource control. People feel marginalized. In fact, people from your region, Southeast, Southwest, there's a lot of feeling of marginalization. So restructuring really means different things to different people. And I'm glad that, you're former Speaker of a state assembly before you went to the National Assembly. So you have a sense of the feelings at the state level and now at the national level. How does this, review process define restructuring? And in what areas are we likely to see those structures or restructuring?
It's a big national issue, a big national question. We agree. But personally, this is a personal view. With this constitutional alteration has not been able to capture much of the yearnings for restructuring has been agitated for and has been canvassed for by Nigerians and some irrespective of where they come from. But I will speak first to the issues that have been captured under the devolution of power. Some, for me, restructuring should be devolution of more powers to the other component unit of the geographical entity in called Nigeria. When I talk about other component unit, the state and the local government. And so I will start with the state. Personally, I sponsored a bill seeking for the establishment of state police, which is part of the agenda under devolution of power and what other people might term restructuring. And that did not scale through, and it got defeated. And personally, I felt that the yearnings and aspiration of Nigerians at that level was not captured. But
for you, if you don't mind me butting in, what reasons would you say were adduced for shooting down the bill that at that time? Like I said, I'm not speaking for the committee, and like I said, there are what we call what do they call privilege of parliamentary communications. I would not speak to why, the reason why, but many reasons were adduced. There are persons who felt that too many powers in the hands of the chief executive at the state at this point, with the experience they've had so far, is going to be inimical to democracy. That's to them. And others said, oh, the state is already overburdened with so much bureaucracy, and to fund another bureaucracy in the position of a state police and state police commission would be additional burden on the state finances. But before then, like I said, there are other issues that have been captured under devolution of power, though not to the extent we expected. Like I said, I sponsored a bill seeking to delist maritime from the exclusive legislative list in the second schedule of the Constitution to the concurrent list, so that the states can share in the power making, share the powers of making law for the establishment of deep sea port. Why did I do this? I have seen the outcome. I have seen the importance of the latitude that we're given in the issue of power generation, where we are, using my state for an instance. I will come to that after. So, like maritime was not captured, which we believe that it was captured. Like, for instance, my state since 1999 has been battling to establish a deep sea port. And I know what that would mean to Nigerian economy. My first governor, Kitobon Victor Ta, conceptualized it. The second, in this fourth republic, then Senator Kpabio set up a mechanism to seek to achieve it, and then Governor Odom came and has put in a mechanism to achieve it, and then they've gotten investors, and then we had to wait for the federal government, because it's still on the exclusive legislative list. We had to wait for the federal government to give us approval for the full business case. If we were to legislate on that, imagine where we would have been. We had investors who were ready to invest, but because of the time delay to give approval. And so that is part of restructuring and devolution of power that has not been captured. But there are other areas. Thank God that we've been able to capture railway issue of the State House of Assembly now, in our proposal, will be able to make laws for the establishment, for the maintenance of railway in their state. We've equally delisted airport in the present proposal. Delisted airport from the exclusive legislative list to the concurrent list. So the state government the State House of Assembly can make laws today for the establishment, maintenance of airport in their state. Then the other one is in the area of power generation. We know that power is critical to development. Power is critical to any economy. And the greatest challenge we've had today in manufacturing sector in this country is the cost of power, cost of energy, which has impacted negatively on the output of production. And so power is key. Before now, in item number 14 on the concurrent legislative list, the State House of Assembly, presently, the State House of Assembly could only make law to establish, for the generation, transmission,
and a distribution of electricity in the state within the areas that are not covered by the national grid. With our present proposal, we've deleted that within the areas not covered by the national grid. That means that the State House of Assembly can now make laws for generation, transmission, and distribution of electricity within the state, even within areas that have been covered by the national grid.
Did you also factor in, my apologies, was it also factored in the investments that the transmission companies and the generation companies have made? Don't answer that yet. Let's take a short break to answer some of those things. We'll be right back. Thanks for staying with us. Honorable, you were talking about the suggestion, because that's where it is now, right? A proposal in the review document. You are talking about the power sector, and I'm wondering what then will be the role of the federal government in this space. Is that also factored in? How is that factored in? Because there are those who are wondering, the transmission company is an exclusive federal government thing. Gencos have, federal government has some stake in that one as well, and all of that. Yeah.
Making an issue into the concurrent list does not preclude the National Assembly from making legislations on those areas. And by way of our positioning, the positioning of the legislature in Nigeria is in such a way that where any law made by any state is in matters in the concurrent list, the laws made by the National Assembly has precedence over the ones that has been made by state. So any law made by state should not be should not be at variance with the provisions of the Act of the National Assembly. And so I believe that with that provision, and then with that latitude, and with that retaining power of the National Assembly to make laws too, even on matters on concurrent lists, because we're not talking about residual lists. They share powers to make law here. I believe that the legislation of the National Assembly will be able to cater for those issues.
Honorable.
You were speaking, you talked about, I was speaking about some level of restructuring to the proposals we have. Like I've mentioned railway. There is this other issue too, correctional and custodial services, which is purely within the ambit of the federal legislature.
Honorable, there are so many issues that we would love to, talk about on this issue. And but I'm just wondering, first of all, how many laws will the Constitution will be affected by this provision, this review document that you have made for the Constitution? Because you're talking about, the power sector, for instance, now, and it brings me to the law that set up the NERC and so many others like that. So how many laws of the Federation are going to be affected by this Constitution review document?
That is, data is key now. And so if you're speaking now, you must speak with data. I have not done that research personally to speak authoritatively to know on the aggregation of laws that are going to be affected by this amendment. But what I can say is that this is a ground norm.
My apologies. Is that to say that those were not factored in, or you just, because this is the ground norm, it has to supersede every other?
No, it has been, when I said it has been factored in, I am speaking about myself here now. Okay. I think generality, as a committee, I think we factored that in. But what I meant is that I might not, you've spoken about the National Electricity Regulatory Commission Act.
Establishment.
And then I was trying to speak about the issue of the delisting of correctional services from the exclusive legislative list to the concurrent legislative list. So that means automatically that the act setting up the national correctional services and custodial services is going to, one way or the other, be impacted. But since it is a national legislation, whatsoever the state will do, are granted the provisions of the Constitution, will not in any way be in conflict with the national legislation or the act. And where such happens, we know that the act of the National Assembly take precedence.
Right. So we're going to Abuja in a moment, but just before we go, I want to understand this, because you're close to the process. So I recall there was a call for memoranda as much as you can. I think you had hundreds coming from different areas. There was a moving around states as well to conduct public hearings, to hear from the people. But I know some of the issues you've talked about that are not captured were raised either by those memoranda, by the public hearings, and now they're not captured. So how did we come to this final, and I say we because anyway, I'm a Nigerian and I have representatives in the National Assembly, but let me just say, how did you, the National Assembly, come to the final, recommendations, the amendments that were made? Who was in charge of capturing what, saying, okay, this one doesn't fly, okay, this one should be included? How did that happen?
The process of constitutional amendment, just like legislation, has it has a process. First process is by the presentation of a bill, and so these are what we have proposed before the National Assembly today are a product of individual member bills or bills sponsored by civil society, and then members have to take it and then own it as private member bills and then present it before the National Assembly. Members equally had their own private member bills. And so most of those issues were raised as bills. And let's not lose sight of the fact that every of the proposals that we have here is a product of a bill. And some of those bills did not scale through second reading. Like I made mention of the issue of delisting of maritime from exclusive legislative list, which I personally had as a bill. It did not scale through. It died at the second reading stage. And so that is what happened to some of the proposals that were raised at that level. And just like my brother John Mutu said, there are interests. People factor in the interest of their constituents. People factor in, unfortunately, right now we are becoming more of regional Nigerians, state Nigerians than nationals. And so because of that, we begin to look at the interests of where we come from, sometimes sacrificing it on the altar of national interest, and because maybe of the lessons that each and every one of us from every segment have passed through. So some of those issues did not scale through second reading. And so what scaled through second reading is what we considered at the ad hoc committee, because the process is first reading, second reading, and then to the ad hoc committee on constitutional review, which was chaired by the Deputy Speaker in the House of Representatives, Right Honorable Ahmed Idris Owase. And with that, we took our report, having met with the consultants, senior advocate of Nigeria, civil society, as part of our consultant, as part of our faculty. We now took it and had a joint sitting with the Senate. And so Senate came with their proposition on the bills that has scaled through second reading. We came with our own proposition. At that joint sitting, we now voted on and agreed and disagreed on some issues. And so what was submitted was a product of the joint sitting of both houses and a product of a consultative meeting with the Conference of Speakers. That happened when I was the speaker in the last dispensation, and it has happened again when I think weekend before last, the ad hoc committee met with, and then the Speakers Conference representing the interest of the state legislatures made an input. And so what we have presented, what was tabled, the report that was laid at the table by the Right Honorable Idris Wase is a product of this process. And so some of those issues that did not see the light of the day were those ones that did not scale through. So nobody took a personal decision to say, the committee did not take a personal decision to say, no, I am not going to vote on this, I'm not going to vote on this. We only take a decision based on the outcome, the output of the process, the normal process of lawmaking of the National Assembly. And that is why we have had the product. Okay, let me bounce this off Mr. Mutu in Abuja.
So to what extent, then, can we say this is representative of the yearnings of the people? If we had people submit memoranda, not just people, groups, CSOs, we had public hearings across the country, and some of those issues raised, like state police and the rest, are not captured. So to what extent can we really say this process is representative of what the people want?
Thank you so much. Reform is an incremental process. It's a continuous process. You cannot achieve everything in one day. People have advocated for issues, submitted memoranda, but that issue that you have submitted has to go through a process, like Right Honorable noted. It started from when the issues were submitted. The consultants were asked to sit down and aggregate those issues. for those that were not captured in the bills, as referred to by Right Honorable Luke, were brought forward as fresh bills sponsored by the committees for consideration by the entire legislature. So that process of consultation, that process of trade-off and continuous advocacy is what has led to what we have today. Because you have submitted a proposal does not necessarily mean that it will go through and will succeed. You just have to continue to follow. And I was really surprised. I was fortunate to be part of the public hearings, both at the zonal and at the national level. A lot of people submitted proposals and went to sleep. You don't just submit your proposal, make and go and sleep. You have to continue to engage and continue to consult and continue to lobby for those items. If you are asking for restructuring, what is the specific aspect of restructuring? There are those who are asking for restructuring based on zonal based. Nigeria should be divided into 6 geopolitical zones. There are others who are asking for creation of more states. So there were divergent views. So how do you harmonize all those views to come up with an acceptable bill that will go through the, and maybe you remember, policy formulation is a game of numbers. Who are those that are in support of it? And if those in support of it, based on what information are they advocating for those issues? So Nigerians should learn from this exercise that when you're advocating for any policy or you want any specific reform, you have to engage in the process from the beginning to the end. Don't just submit the list and go back and sleep. I remember the case of the traditional, even after the advocacy, the public hearing, they continue to engage with the leadership, continue to sensitize Nigerians and the leadership on why it's important for this amendment to go through. Well, so I would say, because you have submitted a proposal, now, does not mean it will automatically.
All of this that you are saying, Mr. Mutu, while it is valid, you don't go to sleep when you drop a proposal and all of that, but it is the job of some people. Some people have been employed by Nigerians to do some jobs. Consider these, bills, propositions, and all of that. So I'm wondering, how will people be able to take ownership of a process that they do not feel justifies their interests? I think that's part of the question that my colleague is asking. How will people be able to take ownership of this and say, this is actually a document of we the people, when we do not have, we do not feel that all of the things that we really want, the state police issue, for instance, local government autonomy, full autonomy, and all of those things are not captured the way we want them to be captured?
Yes, thank you. I share those sentiments completely, but we're talking about the reality. I am a Nigerian. I am also on the streets. I would love all, because I also add issues that I would have loved to go into the constitutional amendment. But like I said, it's a process. Everybody's wishes cannot be captured in the Constitution. Everybody's reform issues can never be captured because it has to go through the process. Only a few. Otherwise, even God does not answer all prayers at the same time. Because one will be saying that kill this man. The other one is saying, God, save me. Where do we build consensus? So what I'm trying to say is that in policy formulation, in policy reform like the constitutional amendment, everything can never be achieved in one day. That's why I say we have achieved some today. Let the process continue. We'll continue to push. And that is why every constitutional amendment, every assembly that comes in, create that opportunity for those reforms that were not captured in the preceding amendment will now be considered. Local government reform in 2000 started right from the first amendment. But today we are getting more acceptance from even those who were resisting it then. And our prayer is that those local government reforms that are being taken forward today scale through the light of day. Next amendment will now be looking at what are the remaining issues that need to be taken forward. And that is why I say the reform process is a journey. It can never be concluded in. And I don't want Nigerians to feel that because what we advocated for did not go through, does not mean that the National Assembly didn't take our issues forward. And I want to quickly say, I am from the South-South. I would have loved the issue of derivation to go into the Constitution. But it's also a game of numbers. I have those sentiments. I share those sentiments. But when it comes to the table for decisions to be taken, the member who represent, or the members who represent the South-South, advocated passionately for those issues. But when it is now bent against other interests at that point in time, You have to trade off on some and gain some. That does not mean that the members or the legislators from the South did not represent their people effectively. And that is the whole beauty of democracy. And that is why I said we have to continue to build consensus. Citizens have to continue to pursue and bring pressure to bear on those who will be taking decisions in the course of the engagement.
Dale, now, Honorable Luke, I'd like you to end on this note, and that's looking forward. We'll maybe look back a bit. There are those who think we need a new constitution altogether, but clearly we're going the amendment way. Governor Makinde of your state, you may have heard the statement he made about, this is a waste of time, and according to him, he says, what we're fighting for is central to the development of this country. States should be able to enforce the laws in their state. Now, that was last year. He was responding to, the public hearings. So that's on the one hand, those that think, well, this is a waste of time. And two is, coming off the Electoral Act Amendment Bill, is still before the president now. We know what happened the previous time. He returned it. Do you have the commitment of the president that, once all of this is done, it will sail through? Or will the president return it again and then probably push this to the next administration?
Let me start with the last issue. I am not the representative. I'm not I'm not the special advisor to President on National Assembly matters, House of Reps. So I might not speak about that commitment of Mr. President. I believe that Nigerians can say whether we have the commitment of Mr. President to do that. But I want to believe that it's my belief that every leader with a sincerity of purpose and for the betterment of the life and the good of the place he leads would always want to act in a manner that would bring good for the people within that community. And I want to say that Mr. President should not, and I don't think he's an exception to that belief of mine. And so on constitutional amendment, there are critical issues that have come up in our proposal. We've had some serious issues. We've had proposals on judicial reforms. For instance, we are proposing the composition of the Court of Appeal today says it should not be President of the Court of Appeal and such other justices of the Court of Appeal not less than 49. And then we are proposing not less than 100. We know the challenges that we are faced in this country with the shortage of manpower in the judiciary and the burden that is on judicial officers. We are still on judiciary reforms. We've had the issue of too many appeals lying as of right to the Supreme Court, and that has brought a burden on the court, brought a burden not only the Supreme Court, the Court of Appeal. And so we are looking at a situation where maybe justices of the Supreme Court and justices of the Court of Appeal can dispense of leave to appeal in chambers, maybe 3 justices of the Court of Appeal, 3 justices of the Supreme Court. Part of the reform we are proposing here. And then reforms even to strengthen institutions like the Revenue Mobilization, Allocation and Fiscal Commission. We are strengthening that commission to ensure that accruals, remittances are made. We've had issues of complaints of certain agencies not making remittances of accruals to the Federation account. So that proposition is to strengthen that institution, to act and then to look at the books of agencies who should remit accruals to the Federation account. So many other proposals. Yeah, so many, like the women participation in politics, like
how did that go?
Action.
I just wanted to even ask you before we close, which of these, you talked about the revenue, judiciary, women in politics, which of these 64, 68 recommendations?
Yeah, 67 recommendations.
67 recommendations. Which of these would you say was the most controversial in the entire process?
The most controversial, some of them that were the most controversial.
Okay, how many, which of them would you say were controversial in the process?
Most of them has not found expression in our final report, like the state police. Yeah, those were the controversial ones. And then the ones you've seen that have found expression is where the ones that we have come on, both the Senate and the House of Reps have come to agreement with. And so, just like you said, to end, yes, I was not in the National Assembly, in the last assembly, 7th Assembly, 8th Assembly. And I heard about the reforms that were made. And so it's my place in the 9th Assembly to be able to make my own little contribution, because I don't intend to go back to the National Assembly. Yeah, I don't intend to go back. So let me contribute to making my position. Let it be that, yes, in my time, I was able to, even if it is in the area of the committee that I chaired through the magnanimity of the Right Honourable Speaker Femi Gbajabiamila, through the grace of God and the leadership of the House of Representatives Committee on Judiciary, even if I'm able to make an impact in judicial reforms to better the lives of judicial officers. For instance, part of our...
We could go on and on,
yes,
Honourable.
the National Judicial Council have been empowered
we could go on and on.
now
maybe
to make for salaries or for judicial officers. They can review that within 4 years.
There are those who are on that judiciary thing that you talked about, for instance. There are those who are wondering, how come we're still having this back and forth concerning the independence of the judiciary at the state houses at the state level, even at the federal level, and all of that. So all those conversations.
There is a new provision
endless.
to take care of that.
We hope that where it will sail
you.
through finally in all of this conversation. We have to thank you very much, for being a part of our conversation this morning.
It's good to have you.
Right Honourable Onofiok Luke is a member House Ad hoc Committee on Constitutional Review and is a former Speaker, Akwa Ibom State House of Assembly. I was even wondering how that is going to play out in the Houses of Assembly when that time comes. So don't speak to that now. John Mutu is also joined us from Abuja Studio, National Coordinator, Democracy Vanguards. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Ian.
Okay. Well, more to come right after now, and that is something that has also been in the news for a while. Please stay with us.
We want to make bold to say that airlines of Nigeria never got together to increase their base fares. It never happened. We debunk that insinuation that the airlines got together we debunk that insinuation that airlines got together to fix prices. And I want to say something here, whether we believe it or we don't believe it. The 50,000 you are seeing on our inventory has always been there. For the last 5 years, 50,000 fare has always been there. During Christmas time, December, the period of December, you notice that fares, the basic fares going to certain areas in the country will be maybe 60, 70,000. Airlines didn't come together to decide to do that. It's a matter of you working out your unit cost per seat of your operations. What is the unit cost per seat of your operation? That will determine your basis. During those periods, you notice that some areas you will fly into full and you'll be coming out with 0 passengers. So airlines will just on their own individually fix their prices to, at least get their costs covered. In the same vein, Jet A1 fuel has risen from 200 naira to a litre to 430 naira to a litre. It's only a very stupid businessman that would not know that there is fire in the mountain.
I had last year, 2 years ago, and I compared to what it is now, and I went, oh my goodness. And that has been the case for a lot of people, and I imagine that it is a big deal, a big concern. So this morning, we're digging deep, really, to understand what's going on and what's the way forward. And to do that with us, as you may have seen, we have Captain Adosunusi, who's an aviation expert. He joins us live from our Lagos studio. And joining us virtually is Mr. Bernard Bankole, who's the Chairman Association of Airline Training Organization of Nigeria. is also Chairman, Finch Glow Group Limited. Gentlemen, good to have you on the program this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Well, Captain, let me begin with you. Clearly not good times for air travel in Nigeria. Yes, I mean, we know about the whole COVID-19, the fallout, and how the sector has struggled, but this is like a part two of what we hoped would not happen again. I mean, we've heard Aon talk about their side of the story, essentially. But for you, really, bringing everything together, what are your immediate thoughts?
Well, the increase in prices, ticket prices, is inevitable because the cost of operation of an airline has increased because of fuel pricing. This will result definitely in an increase in price. Now, the way and manner and how much the increase was done could be debatable because I don't think it is commensurate with the increase in the cost of operation and the way the airlines responded, meaning that mostly all the airlines responded equally with saying that ticket, let's say, from Lagos to Abuja is 50,000. I think that creates suspicion, and I think the aviation regulator should look into it to see whether there was a connivance to increase the price, and that will be a violation of anti-competition regulations and laws, and that will also be a violation for free economy. Now, the airlines are struggling, no doubt about it. But the way they increase prices, and you know, they have to file in prices every season with the regulators. And when they do that, they will stick to those prices that they have filed in. Now, if there's any increase, let's say for Jet A1, then they can go back to the price index where they have the, they call it the fuel surcharge. They can increase it the same amount the fuel marketers have increased the Jet A1 in the market. And looking at what happened in December and what's happening in January or February, the increase in fuel price is close to about 20%. If you go back to November to February, the increase averagely is about 40%. So I think that should translate into ticket prices of about that 40%. There are other factors, you know, there are other factors that contribute to ticket pricing. And that's why it's a bit suspicious when you see all the airlines increasing the prices the same time, the same amount.
No, so you spoke about the fact that price increase is inevitable.
Yeah.
And now, are you by any chance suggesting a review of these prices, and who is to do this review? They are all competitors, just as you have said, but they all agreed that this is what we need to do in the light of all of these things that's happening to us.
Yes, and that's why I said the regulator, the Nigerian Civil Aviation Authority, should investigate.
Should Nigeria Civil Aviation Authority have any role to play in ticket pricing?
No, it's deregulated. Okay. But as I said, despite the fact that it's deregulated, you as an airline individually will file in, for every season, you will file in your prices. This is the starting price, and this is the highest bucket that I'm going to charge. And you can't charge outside those buckets. Now, if there is any increase, and it happens that all the airlines increased in the price at the same time, with the same amount, bearing in mind that these airlines have different financial models, different business model, how will airline A increase by 100% and then the price becomes around 50,000? Airline B, with different business model, different financial model, increase the same to the same 50,000.
But they operate in the same market. They buy the same Jet A1, except they buy from different sources at different rates. But essentially, operational costs might boil down to be the same. So isn't that a fair argument?
Yeah, it's a fair argument, but bear in mind, the cost of fueling is about between 30 to 40% of the cost of an airline operation. And bear in mind, some airlines have brand new airplanes. That is a cost. Some airlines have already paid for their airplanes. Some airlines are paying the banks. So there is different financial models for different airlines. I don't believe that if an airline A is charging 50,000 and has brand new airplanes, and airline B is charging 50,000 and he has already paid for his aircrafts and the aircrafts are 20, 30 years old, I think there should be a difference. You as a passenger too, if you enter a new airplane, you should pay a little extra. And if you enter an old airplane, you should pay a little less.
I mean, interesting points there. So let me take this to Mr. Bankole, because for the average, what do I say, consumer now, the flyer, it's not funny times, really. But it looks like Aon is making a case and saying, well, this is the reality and this is the way to go. But Captain Sanusi thinks there's some suspicion around this and it doesn't quite go down well. Is that your viewpoint also from where you sit?
Well, thank you very much. I can't agree less with him, and it's quite unfortunate. There are certain things in the industry that we consider as illegal. The cost of the fare of tickets is the responsibility, a commercial decision of every airline, and they have the right to how much they want to sell their tickets. However, we have the regulatory. We actually have a directorate in the NCA, Director of Air Transport Regulation, that monitors the airfare filed by each of these airlines. So the question is this: how were they able to come up with similar fare that is almost the same, and that it happened about the same time? Something is fishy and something is fundamentally wrong. Yes, Aon can come to the public and say to us that, wait, we didn't fix these prices. But the question here is this: how did it happen? How are they able to come up with something similar within a short period and at the same time? Something is wrong, and this is where the regulatory needs to move in and explain to the general public that they've done their due diligence and it's not like that. I mean, clear the air, not just leave the press as well as the general public scrambling for the truth or what has gone wrong. And this happens all the time. What happens to consumer protection? Have we had anything from consumer protection? Absolutely nothing. This cannot continue. This is a democratic setting, and we should be able to explain to the general public the reason the cost of fuel, cost of air ticket has gone up. They have other challenges that is even far from cost of fare. We're talking the germane issues that I actually expect Aon to really focus on are not being addressed. Let's say, for instance, the effects that they cannot source from Central Bank is a major factor affecting them. Is a major factor. Why shouldn't they have Jet A12? Why shouldn't they have access to it in a country that produces crude oil? I mean, come on, let's get our acts right.
Are you saying now that, in fact, it's not really their fault as well? And I'd like us to really, I'm not happy about the increase, and I'm sure a lot of people are not, but do we fully understand the situation they're in? So this question you'll answer when we return from our break. Please stay with us. All right, you're welcome back. Well, Mr. Bankole, I was asking whether or not we fully appreciate the situation that the operators are in right now. And when you talked about, the Jet A1, I mean, part of that is not in their purview, as it were. So really, do we understand what they have to contend with right now, coming off COVID-19 and some of the challenges you mentioned, which are out of their control?
Well, to be honest with you, most of the airlines have suffered a lot of losses in the last few months, coming from COVID and now about taking off. Inflation is not helping anybody in the country. Now there's high cost of aviation fuel, lack of access to FX, so many issues. And trust me, maybe we just played into their hands, or they just came up with these tactics and they've gotten the audience that they needed. And the audience is this, that we're all getting to talk about it. Well, maybe if we increase the cost of airfare, everybody will know what we're going through. The issue is not only about airfare. There are so many issues that have been faced with. Every country protects their own. You can never be wrong protecting your own. The question is, what sort of protection are we giving to these domestic carriers? Mind you, I'm not saying that we're saying they should be irresponsible, but we still need to protect our own. You can never be wrong protecting your own. I was reading the other day talking about giving multiple landing rights to some international airlines to fly to some other parts of the country. Then how are you going to encourage code share? How are you going to encourage them partnering with domestic carriers? It's never going to happen. You are gradually killing your own. So we need to revisit how things are done to ensure that these domestic carriers are protected. Not only they are protected, they are well regulated, that they serve the purpose which they've been established. It's very, very important.
So, Captain Sanusi, when we think about regulatory agencies, we always think about them wielding the big stick all the time, but they have a role also to protect the business, nurture them, and help them grow and, of course, meet their targets. He's concerned about government protecting, that's Mr. Bankole, protecting the operators, the airlines well enough. Do you think the government has done right by them?
Well, so many things that need to be done because the aviation industry, as Mr. Bankole has said, needs to be protected. The domestic carriers, they are struggling. There are so many things that affect the profitability of the local carriers. And the regulator is not only to regulate, but to also stimulate growth and also to protect the airlines from falling over. So I think so many things needs to be done to protect the airlines. Multiple points of landing from international airlines is not good for the domestic market. It's the same thing as also over-regulating the market. It's not going to be good for the domestic carriers.
Earlier you spoke, my apologies, Captain.
Yeah.
Earlier you spoke about other cost elements that the aviation sector bears apart from fuel.
Yeah.
What are these other cost elements? Are there some of them that can be removed to help bring the costs back?
Oh yes, there's so many things that can policies that government can put in place to reduce the burden the Nigerian airlines are carrying. Multiple taxation, for instance. You pay NCAA, you pay NAMA, you pay FAN. The cost of using facilities in the airport is high.
Just a moment. These three agencies you spoke about, they are all government agencies?
They are all government agencies.
Federal Airports Authority of Nigeria,
Nigerian Airspace Management Agency, and the Nigerian Civil Aviation Authority.
How do their fees differ, and what are the specific functions of the fees that you pay to each of them? Okay,
so for the Federal Airport Authority, they are the providers of the airports, the tarmac and the rest of them, and the fire cover that you have. So you pay, they call it passenger service charge. You pay that to them. And that increases your ticket. If FAN increases it by 10%, that means your ticket fare increases by 10%. NAMA provides you with navigational facility that allows the airplane to take off, navigate to Abuja, and land safely in Abuja. So you have to pay for those services. Now, if that price increase, of course, the airline would transfer it to the customer. Then the Nigerian Civil Aviation Authority also takes 5% of the ticket sales. That also increases your price of your ticket.
You told us the function of other taxes.
The 5% is for safety oversight, meaning they are regulating, so you have to pay for the the regulation they do, the oversight they do. So you pay 5% of every ticket you sell or a cargo that you take.
So if government was to make a policy, just as you have said, how significantly will that bring down the cost of airfares?
Well, in the first instance, I think there should be one tax that airlines should pay to the government.
Practice?
Globally, yes. Naturally, it's been done, and the regulator is usually most aviation, civil aviation is usually funded by the government, not the airlines. Because look at it, if the airlines are sick, meaning they are struggling, so meaning the funding of the oversight will be also affected. And that's what's happening.
Interesting. So, I mean, if this thing lingers, I mean, so passengers aren't flying as they ought to, airlines aren't making as much money as they ought to, those agencies will start growing lean, as it were. So this is, they're in this together, as it were.
Yes, exactly.
But your suspicion might maybe be based on things that have happened in the past.
Yeah.
Has this ever played out in recent times, or, you know?
Yeah, there has been times when the airline organization wanted to come together and increase the fare of ticket fare, and we objected because I don't think it's right. As I said, there is a smart and intelligent way of increasing fares because you have to study the market. You don't want to overprice yourself out of the market. You have to study your consumers. You have to study also the economy of the country before you increase your price. And when you increase your price, you don't increase it just by a figure. You increase it intelligently based on science that you have seen and with a percentage, and you increase it by taxes because they are fare bases. You have NY and all those fare bases that you have on your ticket. When you buy your ticket, you see the taxes. And you can see that the base fare will remain the same, probably, and then the fuel surcharge will be probably increased by the amount the fuel is increased. If it's 40%, you increase it by 40%. And then you look at your cost. As I said, there are so many cost aspects to airlines operation in this country. So we objected that time, and they agreed. And you can see that the increase from when it was 25 to when it became 35 was gradual, and the passengers did not feel it that much. But when it became from 35 to 50, was sudden and unanimously done. That's why I think it was a bit suspicious.
So I'll ask both of you the same question, but let me ask Mr. Bankole first. So, I mean, from 35 to 50, and that's why when I saw, 25 in the previous, searches and I see 50, I'm like, wait a minute, this could actually have taken me twice. So what kind of price would you think would be intelligent enough at this point? So we're at a point where it's grown to almost ×2. What do you think it should have been?
Well, to be honest with you, it's going to be difficult to say that. Are we saying that the 50,000 naira is not justifiable? I mean, if we put the figures together and they can justify it, then there's no problem. But there are better ways of getting things done. And that's why we have the regulatory arm that can ensure that these airlines do not just suddenly increases their prices without recourse. What happens to airline waiving VAT on the purchase of spare parts, waiving custom duty, just to help these domestic airlines stay in business? You had the opportunity of looking into their financials. So there are several ways you can control the airfare from becoming astronomical. Can I ask you a question? The question is this. For people that are time conscious and are very careful about their life, they're probably not going to go by a road to certain parts of the country. They probably want to fly. So people have been left with no choice other than to embrace the fare as it is. So the government plays a vital role in ensuring that the cost of Well, it's minimal because the truth is the airline wants to stay in operation. If the fare is too much, it's too high, and they are not getting passengers, then they will be forced to reduce the fare. But in this scenario, the passengers are there. And for me, one of the things that I believe the airlines should have done, they need to increase the service they render to the general public. You have delayed flights, no compensation, passengers are disgruntled, nobody's saying anything to them, and at the end of the day, what you give to them again is you hike the fare. I mean, who does that?
If you can hear me, we'll come to that in just a moment. You want to quickly respond to that
Yes.
question as well?
Yeah. We cannot say 50,000 is fair or it's not fair. Each airline, as I said, has its own financial model, and they're supposed to look at intelligently look at how they will increase their ticket to respond to the demands or to respond to the cost that they are operating inside. So it's not a figure. I cannot come out with a figure if to tell you that this is the right figure. But if we're going to look, if the airlines are complaining only on fueling, Jet A1, then you look at what is the increase in prices of Jet A1 from November, December, January, February. And you see that averagely it's about 35–40%. So if there is an increase of about 35–40% on fuel surcharge, I think that is fair. And if there is other things that affects or increase their costs, for example, the sourcing of dollars, or the dollars is quite expensive, then that justifies increasing it more. But more importantly is you have to be sensitive to the market, and you don't want to overprice yourself out of the market.
Do you think that this decision has been taken with sensitivity to the market?
I don't think so. I don't think so, because you can't raise prices just from 25, 35 to 50 at one go.
Do you think it's the market reacting now with the low patronage?
I think that's what's going to happen. You see, the problem will be the leisure travelers, those that can afford to travel by road, because the time is not of essence to them, will go by road. And those that will go by train, they will go by train.
Okay.
And then we're losing the market. We're supposed to stimulate the market. We're supposed to ensure that disposable income are used to buy our tickets.
You talked about other cost elements. I wanted to ask Mr. Bankole something different. You talked about other cost elements which influence the rise in the airfare altogether. Do you think people are aware of this? Do you think the regulators conscious of these other things and the ripple effect it will have on the airfare costs?
Well, I think the federal government is very much aware of the pains that the airlines are going, and that's why the Federal Ministry of Aviation have championed the fact that they should remove VAT, they should remove custom duties and other stuff to make sure that they reduce the cost of operation of an airliner.
But how about those other costs you mentioned?
The other costs, the taxes, are the ones that we're still fighting to make sure that the federal government understands. I mean, we cannot continue to do the same thing and expect to have different results.
But these agencies that you talked about, they're under the Federal Ministry of Aviation.
Yes, exactly. So that's why we're saying we're still telling the federal government that, look, it's not working. If the airlines are not performing very well, it affects the agencies. If we stop getting passengers, it affects the agency. So there must be alternative way of funding, especially the Nigerian Civil Aviation Authority, whereby its function is very vital in aviation industry, because it's overseeing safety. It regulates the airlines. And if these airlines are not generating enough money to give them the 5%, so that they can do an effective oversight, and regulate and stimulate the aviation industry, then something is wrong, and that is what is happening.
You know, this increment was like adding salt to injury, as it were, because people have been grappling with the service, the quality of service with some airlines in that sector. I know you smile because, I mean, this is like an endless tale. Let me begin with Mr. Bankole on this one. I mean, copy in a mail which a passenger has been having with a particular airline. I think this is United Airlines, about, you know, flight being cancelled just hours before, flight via text message. I think this was as far back as October 17 last year. Until today, it looks like they're still having back and forth with, are you going to refund me or not? And this is someone that has been tenacious, sending mails, you know, constructing the English very well in an understandable manner. So, increment on the one hand, but the quality of service in the aviation industry, how close are we to an end?
And we start with the regulators again. We used to have a directorate that was in charge of consumer protection. What happened to that directorate? At a point, this was moved out of the agency. The truth is, we can't be doing same thing and expect different results. Things should be improving. We shouldn't have things falling apart. And it cannot continue like this. For every airfare, there are conditions to that ticket. Some of those tickets are non-refundable. Some are refundable. Some are just taxes refundable. So there are different fares, different categories. Maybe this particular passenger had bought a non-refundable ticket. The conditions to that ticket is what the airline is going to go with, despite the fact that they canceled that flight. And there are different reasons why they cancel flights. I'm not speaking for the airlines that the services they've rendered in the past have been the best. As a matter of fact, most times when I'm going to the airport, I just say to myself, is whenever the plane is available that I fly, so that I don't get myself unnecessarily worked up or upset. Because what other choice do I have? I don't have a private jet, so it means I have to rely on these commercial carriers. So the truth is, we need to look at it holistically to know where it has gone wrong.
If you can hear me, Mr. Bankole, just a moment. On that same issue that you raised, there are those airlines in this same country that are always on time. Some are notorious for not being on time. There are those who are always on time. So I'm wondering, while you say that people don't have a choice, but then clearly there are choices. So is it a function of the regulator now, or the airlines themselves, the airline operators themselves, playing their part to ensure that they do the needful, especially about timely takeoff and landing?
Yes, we have some of them that are extremely reliable. But there's this thing that we call law of precedence. If I've done something once and I've gotten away with it, there's every tendency that I'll do it again. I mean, nobody's holding me responsible. I keep passengers at an airport for 3-4 hours, and I come to them and I say, oh, technical challenges, and they take it. Or we outrightly cancel the flight for technical challenge. There's nothing you can do. If they say the aircraft is not serviceable or is not good at that particular point in time, you're not going to say they must fly by force. So there are excuses that the airline uses and they get away with things. So this is where the regulator comes in to ensure that we have disciplined people managing this airline. It's very important.
So thank you, Mr. Bankole. Captain, I'd like you to have the last word on this as we wind down. Yeah. So how hard is it to give a refund? Because, I mean, there's been promises, we're working on it, fill this form. Yeah. Okay, we're getting this and all that. How hard is it to make a refund? How hard is it to inform ahead of time? How hard is it to apologize? Because some people just want to hear, we're really sorry for this. How hard are these things?
They are not hard. And, you know, delays and cancellations will always happen in aviation, globally. Now, how you handle it as an airline, that's what matters. Now, there's so many things that you see, especially in Nigerian aviation, that cause passengers to be disruptive, to start breaking computers and all that, because the way the airline communicates the delays or cancellation or the refund. I'll come to the refund later. But there are so many things that contribute to those misbehaviors that you see from passengers. One of them is even the environment. Let's take, you have a delay in Heathrow, or even a local airport, Manchester, or maybe in the United States, let's say a small airport. The environment, the toilet, the food canteen are all good, and you would like to go there. So if there's a delay of 2 hours, you are not really worried, especially if you're a leisure traveler and you don't have any business.
That's the job of a regulator, I imagine, to make the place conducive.
To make the place conducive, it's the airport authority. Now, you cancel a flight. First, the passenger went to the toilet, and the toilet was really bad. And then the sitting place was horrible. And then to put more, the airline now just announced cancellation, the delay for another 3 hours. He's going to sit in the same kind of environment. Of course, the passenger will be very angry. Now, cancellation and refunds, because you buy tickets differently. You buy tickets through travel agent, through credit cards, through debit cards, cash, bank transfer. The airlines usually refund the way you bought your ticket. So you can't buy a ticket with a credit card and expect cash refund at the counter. Now, the airline has the responsibility after canceling a flight to ensure that even though you bought your ticket, they make alternative arrangements for you,
right, and
they make sure that you get to where you're going. You can imagine if somebody uses last 50,000 for the month to buy a ticket,
goodness,
and then they cancel the flight, and then he doesn't have money to go back to the hotel, and the airline is telling him that come back 3 days to get your refund.
That will definitely hurt more.
That's going to hurt him more.
Oh, goodness.
Just another conversation we can't continue.
Absolutely. But I mean, it's been quite instructive, the points made here, and we'd like to thank you so much, Captain Addison, who's the aviation expert, as well as Mr. Bernard Bankole, who joined us via Zoom. He's the Chairman, Association of Airline Training Organization of Nigeria, and the Chairman, Finch Glow Group Limited. Gentlemen, wish you a safe trip.
Thank you very much.
Well, a few messages just before we go that came from you, Oladile Olagunju, about airline operations. Passenger traffic volumes remain depressed due to inflation and uncoordinated policies, he says. How will the airlines cover the cost of operations if the government continues trying to dictate businesses? Although if the government had made other forms of travel options easy and secure, the masses wouldn't be complaining.
Well, this one is a mail from Dixon Eka on the Constitution review conversation we had, saying one of the most important things in the Constitution Amendment is a provision of financial autonomy for the local government. But the National Assembly should not stop at the provision of financial autonomy alone. The state independent electoral commissions should be scrapped, while INEC should conduct local government elections. Let local government councils be empowered to reduce too much pressure on the state and federal government.
That's a tall order right there. And this one is from Henry about the same issue of constitutional amendment. I commend the First Lady for the high-level advocacy visit to the National Assembly to support the legalizing of the affirmative action and improvement of women participation. I'm rather worried that out of the clauses slated for alteration, there is none on health. It was a major slip, as we all need to be alive and well first before aspiring to the moon, as COVID-19 pandemic has demonstrated. An opportunity to make health insurance mandatory and do away with HMOs has been missed. A tall one, isn't
Absolutely. Well, that's where we wrap up the show today. Don't forget, it's 11 days into that warning strike by ASU. Lots of students still trying to find their bearing. I'm Kayode Okikiolu. Thank you for watching.
Have a wonderful day. I'm Ayo. Thank you.